The 90s were a wild time. You could go anywhere, do anything, and no one knew where you had been or what you had done. Hitchhiking across the country. People did that all the time. Backpacking through cities, small towns, deserts, and forests. It was a freedom that simply does not exist today. Back then, there were no cell phones like today, no GPS tracking every movement. You could disappear for days, weeks, or even months, and no one would have batted an eye. That is exactly what I loved about it. And at the same time, it scared the hell out of me. I spent most of the 90s on the road. A free spirit, as they call it, although I never saw myself that way. I was just a guy who did not want to be tied down. If I am honest, I was running from my fears, from the looming takeover of technology, and from responsibility. Whatever it was, I was just running away. However, one trip that I have tried not to think about for years comes back to me again and again. I was out in the Nevada desert, in the middle of nowhere, and it started like these stories always start, harmless enough. I had been hitchhiking for a few days, catching a ride here and there, but my supplies were running low. No water, no food, just the clothes on my back and a backpack with a few small things. That morning I had been lucky when a couple picked me up. They seemed nice enough, at least at first, but somewhere along the way that changed. Maybe it was something I said, or maybe it was just the heat getting to them. They went quiet, exchanged a few looks that made me uneasy, and around noon, they stopped and threw me out without another word. And so, I was suddenly stranded in the middle of the Nevada desert. No shade, no relief, just miles upon miles of wasteland stretching in every direction. The sun was like a demon above me, frying everything beneath it. I already felt dizzy from the heat, and my mouth was dry as sandpaper. I knew I would not last long if I did not find water or some kind of shelter soon, so I started walking, because what else was I supposed to do? Every step felt heavier than the last, my boots kicking up little clouds of dust. Occasionally I glanced at the horizon, hoping for something, but there was nothing, just heat and emptiness. Then I saw a black speck in the distance, moving quickly through the desert. A truck, a big semi. It was still a few miles away, but I could definitely see it cutting through the shimmering heat like a mirage. For a brief moment, I thought I was hallucinating, that my mind had finally snapped. But no, it was real. I turned and faced the approaching truck, waving my arms like a madman, hoping to get the driver's attention. As he got closer, I heard the deep rumble of the engine and felt the ground vibrate beneath my feet. The truck honked, a loud booming sound that echoed across the desert, and I felt a wave of relief as it pulled over onto the shoulder. The driver's door swung open, and a man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a shaggy beard and a trucker hat pulled low over his face. He had a cigarette between his lips, took a long drag, and looked me over appraisingly. "You look like you have seen better days," he said with a scratchy voice. "Need a lift?" I nodded, too exhausted to speak, and he waved me to get in. I pulled myself into the passenger seat, sinking into the worn leather as the cool air from the air conditioner hit my face. It was like I had arrived in heaven. The driver climbed back into the cockpit, put it in gear, and the truck rolled on, the engine humming deep beneath us. "My name is Biff," he said, glancing at me briefly. "Are you hitchhiking through the desert, or just trying to commit suicide?" I managed a weak laugh, wiping the sweat from my forehead. "A bit of both, I guess. I just got dropped off. Thanks for stopping." Biff shrugged. "No problem. I have been on these roads long enough to know when someone is in trouble." You do not last long out here, especially without water." We talked for a while as the miles flowed beneath us, and I began to relax. He seemed like a decent guy, a bit rough around the edges. But he had been on the road for years, just like me. He told me about some places he had been and strange things he had seen, and I shared a few of my own stories. It did not take long for the exhaustion to catch up with me completely. I could feel my eyelids getting heavy. "You look beat," said Biff, noticing me fighting sleep. "Take a nap. This heat gets to you faster than you think." I hesitated for a moment, but the cool air and the monotone hum of the engine slowly lulled me into a trance. I nodded and leaned back in the seat. "Thanks. I will just close my eyes for a second." And before I knew it, I was asleep. When I woke up, it was dark. The sun had disappeared, giving way to a black sky full of stars. The truck was still rolling, the engine humming softly, but something was wrong. I blinked, trying to shake off the grogginess, and that is when I noticed I could not move. I looked down, and my heart skipped a beat. Something was holding me tight in my seat. I reached down, expecting a seat belt, but instead, I found a thick braided cable. I pulled on it, but it did not budge. "I would not make him angry if I were you," Biff mumbled from the darkness. "Make him angry." I looked down and froze in horror. Wrapped around me was something like a living seatbelt, almost like a giant snake. Its thick, muscular body was coiled tightly around my torso and legs, holding me firmly in my seat. My breath hitched, and panic rose in me as I tried to squirm, but the more I moved, the tighter the snake constricted. "I see you have met Scrooge," said Biff, grinning, his teeth gleaming in the dim light of the dashboard. "He is my little travel companion. Makes things interesting." My mouth was dry, my heart hammering. What the hell is this? Biff just laughed, his fingers tapping in rhythm on the steering wheel. "Relax, buddy. Scrooge will not hurt you as long as you do not give him a reason to. He is almost like quicksand. The more you fight, the tighter he holds you. So, I suggest you stay very calm." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. The cold, scaly body of the snake pressed firmly against me, its head resting near my stomach. I could feel its slow, rhythmic breathing, the soft hiss when it exhaled. My skin crawled with disgust, but I forced myself to stay still, just like Biff said. "The thing must be at least 3 meters long." Biff informed me casually. He told me he had originally got the snake to keep vermin out of the cab, which had worked pretty well at first. The only problem was that Scrooge just kept growing, like he was supposed to, and at some point, Biff got the idea to train him a little. He glanced at me, his eyes twinkling with a kind of sick amusement. "Have you ever been really scared, boy? I mean really, really scared. There is something about it, you know. Gets the blood moving, makes you feel alive. I like seeing how far I can push someone before they break." I stared at him. "You are crazy." Biff laughed, a deep booming sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "Yeah, maybe. Or maybe I just know how to have fun. Look, if you are good, I will let you go. But first, we have to feed Scrooge. He gets pretty cranky when he does not eat, and believe me, you do not want that." Horrified, I watched as Biff opened the glove compartment and pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was a dead rat, the body limp and twisted, the fur matted and blood encrusted. Biff held it out to me, his grin like that of a madman. "Go on," he said in a deep, menacing voice. "Feed him." I shook my head, my stomach turning. "You cannot." "Oh, you can," he interrupted me, his grin widening. "But there is a catch. You cannot use your hands." My heart sank as I realized what he was asking of me. He wanted me to feed the rat with my mouth. I stared at the rat, my throat tightening and the stench of decay making me gag. Biff's grin did not disappear. I knew he was not joking. I had no choice. Tears burned in my eyes as I leaned forward, my hands trembling. I bit into the matted fur of the rat as the taste of blood and rot filled my mouth. It was disgusting, the worst thing I had ever tasted. I could feel the cold, stiff body of the rat against my tongue, fighting the urge to vomit. The snake stirred, its head lifting slightly as it sniffed the air. I held the rat out and prayed it would just take it and let me go. For what felt like an eternity, nothing happened. The snake just stared at me, its eyes unblinking, the forked tongue flicking out, tasting the air. Then, slowly, it began to move. The coils around my body loosened slightly as the snake glided forward, its head now level with my face. I held my breath as the snake opened its mouth. In one quick motion, it snatched the rat and swallowed it with a powerful jerk. As soon as the snake's jaws closed around the rat, I pulled back hastily, tore at my seatbelt, and threw the truck door open. Damn it! Biff cursed as he slammed on the brakes, and the truck rolled onto the shoulder. I could not take this anymore. With a desperate leap, I fell out of the cab onto the asphalt. I hit the ground hard, my hands and knees scraping over the rough asphalt, but I did not stop. I jumped up and ran, my legs pumping, while the truck engine roared behind me. Biff's laugh rang out in the night air, a high, manic sound that went through me. "Run, boy, run," he screamed, followed by a long honk. The truck's headlights flickered out, plunging the desert into total darkness. I could not see, but I could hear the truck, the rumble of the engine getting louder as it thundered down the road. I veered off the road, stumbling into the darkness of the desert, my breath coming in rough, hoarse gasps. The truck shot past me, so close I felt the gust of wind that almost knocked me over. For hours I wandered through the darkness, the taste of the dead rat still in my mouth and Biff's laughter in my ears. I could not believe what had just happened. All I could do was just keep walking. As I crested a hill, still desperately trying to get rid of the disgusting taste, I finally saw something lights of a town in the distance. Finally, a small spark of relief flooded me. I also saw a truck driving on the highway in the distance, its headlights flashing on and off. It was driving in the opposite direction, but just the sight of it made my blood run cold. I waited until the truck was out of sight before I walked the rest of the way towards the town. For obvious reasons, I rarely hitched after that, and I never got into a big truck again. Thanks for nothing, Biff. Next true horror story. I always thought that love would be enough. You know, that kind of love that burns bright enough to make even the bad days seem like mere headaches. I thought that was exactly what Teddy and I had. He was my high school sweetheart, after all. He could be sugar, sweet when he wanted to be. But that is the thing about people. They surprise you, change in ways you do not see coming, especially when you are young and think you have it all figured out. We grew up in a flat little nowhere town in Kansas, where the heat stuck to your skin like syrup and the horizon stretched out as if it had no end. There was not much to do except drink at the local bar or work for the handful of employers in town. Teddy worked for a local building supply yard, driving gravel and stones around the country in his truck. I worked as a waitress, sometimes helping out at the post office when extra hands were needed. It was not a glamorous life, but it was ours. Simple, I thought. At least, that was in the 90s, when time seemed to stand still. No cell phones tracking you every minute. No social media presenting your business to the world. There was just you, the sky, and the road, if you wanted it. Teddy and I were caught up in our romance, but things started to change when he began taking those energy pills from gas stations. Back then, they were a popular fix among truckers, basically legal speed. Teddy talked about how they woke him up and kept him going, allowing him to complete more trips in less time. But I could see the change in him weeks before he noticed it himself. He came home later and later, and his eyes had this glassy, nervous look, like the old cartoon characters bouncing from one wall to another. His once calm, easygoing nature was gone, replaced by a frantic energy that made him grit his teeth and his fingers twitch. It was literally always go, 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 and it was wearing him down in a way I did not understand at first. Then came the mood swings. His patience was gone, replaced by a short fuse that exploded at the slightest provocation. If I dropped a plate, he screamed at me how careless I was. If I asked how his day was, he ranted about how no one understood what it is like to be alone on the road for hours, just him and his truck against the world. It did not take long before I wondered if it was even worth it anymore. Maybe the Teddy I had once loved was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. One night, after another fight about what I do not even remember, I told him I was done. I told him I could no longer live like this, watching him dissolve further day by day. He said not a word, just stared at me with that hollow, dead look, and then stormed out the door, slamming it so hard the walls shook. I watched him get into his truck and race out of the driveway as if the devil were after him. It felt like a sign, and I took the opportunity, packing my things. I threw clothes and essentials into a few boxes and a duffel bag. I wanted to leave forever. I was just loading the last box into the trunk of my car when I heard the deep rumble of his truck coming down the street. I froze. Before I could even process what was happening, Teddy's truck had pulled up behind me, blocking the driveway. He jumped out, and in the next moment, he was on me. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" he growled, his voice full of rage and his breath reeking of alcohol. Before I could answer, he grabbed me and slammed me against the car, so hard the breath was knocked out of me. I fought back, kicked and squirmed, but he was too strong. His hands were like vices as he bound my wrists with zip ties. I screamed, hoping someone would hear me. But we lived far enough out that the only ears nearby were the cicadas. "Stop fighting," he growled, dragging me across the driveway to his truck. "You are not going anywhere." I tried to comprehend how this all escalated so quickly. One minute, I just wanted to leave, and the next I was being thrown into the back of his truck. The trailer loomed before me like the maw of a monster ready to devour me. He shoved me inside, slammed the door, and locked it from the outside. Darkness swallowed me, and for a few seconds, I could hear nothing but my own breathing. The engine roared, and the truck jerked forward, sending me slamming against the wall. The interior of the trailer was just metal and shadows. No cargo, nothing to cushion the blows. Teddy turned onto the main road, his speed increasing with every second. I tried to stabilize myself, but the movement of the truck tossed me around the trailer like a rag doll. Every turn sent me sliding against the walls. Every bump brought me hard to the floor, enough to leave bruises everywhere. Eventually, my head hit something metallic, and stars exploded behind my eyes. The pain was sharp, burning. After that, I went limp, not quite unconscious, but close enough that the world around me slipped in and out of focus. This ride seemed endless, the roar of the engine, The wild swerving, the rattling of the trailer as if it were falling apart. I had no idea where we were going or what Teddy planned to do with me, but I knew it was nothing good. After what felt like hours, the truck's brakes finally screeched. The engine idled for a few moments before shutting off. I held my breath, listening as the driver's door opened and then slammed shut. Footsteps, his heavy boots crunching on gravel as he approached the trailer. The door swung open, and there he was, silhouetted against the moonlit sky. He climbed into the trailer, his shadow long and menacing as it dragged across the floor. "You think you can just leave me?" He spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You think you are too good for me now, huh?" I tried to speak, to beg, but my mouth was dry, my throat felt like snakeskin. Before I could muster the strength to even form words, he was on me again. He grabbed me, yanked me to my feet, and dragged me to the open door. "You want out," he sneered. "Fine, get out." He pushed me with full force. I fell, hitting the ground hard, and the air was knocked from my lungs again. My vision was blurry, and I gasped for air, my chest heaving as I tried to comprehend what was happening around me. He stood over me, his chest rising and falling in deep, controlled breaths. He was completely out of control, insane. The Teddy I had once known was long gone, replaced by a monster that barely looked like the man I had loved. "I should just leave you here," he growled. "See how you like it." I tried to crawl away, but he grabbed my ankle and pulled me back to him. My head spun, the world tilting around me as I fought to stay conscious. Then, without warning, he hit me on the back of the head with something. Everything went blurry again. I could hear footsteps but could not tell if they were coming or going. Then the truck roared again. I was sure he would just run me over, crush me, and let the scavengers deal with the rest. But he did not. Instead, he turned in a wide arc and drove back to the main road. I just lay there in the dirt, my vision swimming, and the world around me went dark. I lay out there unconscious for the next 10 hours. As it turned out, Teddy had hit me on the back of the head with his tire iron, giving me a severe concussion. When I came to, the first thing I heard was the sound of a car, initially quiet and distant, then gradually getting closer. Slowly, I opened my eyes and saw two figures standing over me. Their faces were blurry in the early morning light. "Are you okay?" one of them asked. I tried to speak, but my mouth was too dry. Instead, I just nodded weakly. "We almost ran you over," said the other. "What the hell happened to you?" I had neither the strength nor the energy to explain, but they did not need to hear it. They could see the zip ties on my wrists, the bruises on my skin, and the dirt clinging to me. They cut me loose, helped me to my feet, and offered me a ride back to town. The whole way, I said not a word. I just stared silently out the window, completely dazed and exhausted, still tasting the dust and dirt in my mouth. When we got back to town, I went straight to Teddy's house. My car was still there, the trunk open, and my half-packed things scattered across the driveway. Teddy and his truck were gone. I never saw him again. I packed everything up, moved in with my sister, and later found my own apartment. Everyone in town knew what had happened, so no one had a hard time keeping him away from me. Not that he spent much time in town after that. He worked nonstop, always going, always faster, as if to prove no one could keep up. A few years later, I learned that Teddy had died in an accident. He had run off the road with his truck and did not survive. And you know what? I did not shed a single tear. That was justice in my eyes. The law did not need to intervene. It did not even need anyone to hold him accountable. Sometimes monsters take care of themselves. Next true horror story. I have been a trucker almost my whole life. The long hauls keep the lights on and the fridge full, but I take shorter trips now, and then, if the price is right. Such jobs are not glamorous. Hell, none of them are. But there is something to be said for spending a few hours on the road and getting paid more than you usually would for a whole day. About 6 months ago, I stumbled upon one of these jobs, quick transports in a valley area I knew hardly anything about. The pay was high, unusually high for such a short trip, but I did not ask too many questions. A trucker learns to keep his head down and his mouth shut, especially when a job pays better than it should. The first few times, it was pretty simple stuff: raw materials, steel beams, concrete blocks, large bags of gravel, things like that. Always from one end of the sprawling valley to the other. The valley itself was nothing special: rolling hills with dry grass, a few scattered farms, and a lot of nothing in between. The towns were small, just a few thousand residents here and there. I did not spend much time there. I drove in, grabbed the trailer, took it to a drop-off point in a neighboring town, and that was it. Easy money, no trouble. Over time, I got used to the work and knew the routes, even though I kept doing my regular long-haul trips on the side. These short runs were just a good way to fill the gaps when the big contracts were scarce. One morning, however, I got a request that was a bit different from the usual. The email came as always, short, to the point, and somewhat vague. This time, though, the instructions were a bit strange. The pickup location was not a typical warehouse or any parking lot. No, it was remote. Unorthodox was the word they used. The entire trip would be off-grid, they said. No paved roads except to get out of town. That should have been my first warning sign. No name was attached to the request. Just coordinates where I would find the trailer. Normally, I would have declined something so questionable. But the pay was too good to ignore. Probably some rich farmer, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, who did not feel like following the rules, I figured. I had seen types like that: plenty of money, little patience, and a sense of superiority that put them above formalities, and sometimes even above the law. I figured anything could be in that trailer: guns, money, drugs. The next day, I loaded up my truck and set off. I followed the vague instructions I had been given. The sun was just rising. I had that peaceful feeling you get when the road belongs to you alone. Just you and the hum of the engine cutting through the morning mist. The instructions led me out of town, about a mile down the country road, before they told me to turn onto a dusty rest area. Sure enough, there was a trailer. No lock, no guard. Not even a chain preventing someone from stealing it in the middle of the night. It was just sitting there in the dirt, like a forgotten piece of trash. I looked it over closer, checked the tires, and made sure everything was in order. The trailer was clean, well maintained, but that just made the whole thing even weirder. I had hauled enough trailers to know when something does not feel right, and this did not feel right. It was untouched, intact, and properly handled. So, I hitched it to my truck without issues and turned around. The trailer had to be taken through town to the other side, where I was supposed to drop it off. Seemed simple enough. The weirdest part was that the trailer had no markings whatsoever, which was really unusual. As I drove onto the highway, however, something gnawed at my mind. All the farms were on this side of town, not the other. It made no sense. What could I possibly be transporting through town, away from the farms? It was not like I was delivering something to a factory or a warehouse on the other side. Hell, there was hardly anything out there, except a few old mining roads that had not seen traffic in years. I scratched my head, going through the possibilities. Maybe it was some black market deal, illegal goods, or stolen property. Or maybe I was just overthinking everything. Either way, I could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. The instructions led me straight through the heart of town, past those old brick buildings and tired storefronts that looked like they had not changed in decades. People were going about their day, walking their dogs, getting their morning coffee, completely oblivious that I might be transporting something illegal right through their quiet, little community. The thought turned my stomach, but I could not do much. I just followed the instructions. To this point, in that moment, I realized I might be transporting toxic waste, maybe even something nuclear. This whole town could be in danger if I made just one small mistake. On the other side of town, I took an old mining road, just as the instructions stipulated. The further I drove, the worse I felt. The road was narrow, winding through dense trees and rocky hills. The kind of place where you wonder if you are really still on the right path. I had not seen a single car since town, and out here there was no cell reception, so if something went wrong, I was on my own. No number to call, no one to ask for help, just me, my truck, and this damn trailer. The instructions said I should look for a parking lot marked with orange cones, and sure enough, after a few miles, I saw them. The parking lot was wide enough to unload the trailer without issues. But there was no one there. No buildings, no cars, nothing. Just trees and dirt, as far as the eye could see. I steered my truck in, parked, and got out to uncouple the trailer. As I walked around the truck, I noticed that the trailer was unlocked. No padlock, no seal, nothing. That was unusual. Most loads are tightly locked, even for short trips. Curiosity got the better of me. I thought I could take a quick peek inside. After all, I had the right to know if I was transporting something illegal, right? I swung the doors open and regretted it immediately. The stench hit me like a punch to the gut. A smell of rotting meat, thick and disgusting. I gagged, covered my mouth with my sleeve, and looked inside. The trailer was full of meat, raw pieces, sides of beef, pork, even poultry. Everything was stacked haphazardly on metal racks, but this was not a refrigerated trailer. The meat was rotting, oozing blood and grease onto the floor, where it pooled in thick, greasy puddles. I slammed the doors shut, my stomach churning, and the image burned into my brain. What the hell was that? The stench still hung in my nostrils as I uncoupled the trailer and climbed back into the cab. I sat there for a minute, hands trembling on the steering wheel, trying to comprehend what had just happened here. Why would someone transport meat like that, knowing it would spoil within hours? And why here, in the middle of nowhere, where no one could pick it up in time? None of it made sense. I drove back the way I had come, trying to push the whole thing out of my mind. By the time I was back in town, I had convinced myself it was no longer my problem. I had done my job. I had delivered the trailer. I would get paid. End of story. But that night, as I lay in bed, I could not stop thinking about it. The stench, the meat, the strange instructions. Something about it was just wrong, like a piece of the puzzle was missing. The next day, I checked my bank account and sure enough, the payment had gone through. But it did not come from a local farmer or business. No, it came from a government account. That is when the unease really started. Why would the government pay me for such cargo? What the hell were they planning with that trailer full of rotting meat in the middle of nowhere? I could not let it go. I had to know what happened to that trailer and what I had really transported. I grabbed my truck, my regular Chevy, and drove out to where the parking lot was. The cones were still there, but the trailer was gone. I got out and looked around. In the dirt, I found tire tracks, deep tracks leading from the parking lot back into the forest. Someone had come to get the trailer, but they had not come from town. They had come from deeper within the wilderness. I followed the tracks as far as I could. They wound through the trees and the rocky terrain until I came to an old abandoned mine entrance. The tracks led directly into the mine, into the darkness where no truck should ever drive. My heart hammered in my chest as I stood there staring into the jagged black hole, my head full of thoughts I would rather not have had. Whatever was going on here, I wanted no part of it. I turned around, got back in my truck, and drove away without looking back. That was the last time I took a short job in that valley. To this day, I still wonder what I really transported that morning, or, more importantly, why. Next true horror story. I have been driving trucks for a long time, crossing state lines and navigating more highways than I can count. I have seen a lot out there, especially at night when the roads are quiet and the world feels like it is sliding into some other place. Especially in the Southwest, it is different. There is something about the desert land, the emptiness, the sky stretching forever, and the way the wind seems to carry whispers. I cannot explain it, but it is a different place. I have seen people there too, strange figures just standing in the desert, looking lost, or maybe just watching. Sometimes I swear I have seen things in the shadows, things that should not have been moving. Once, I even saw a line of people crawling on hands and knees along the side of the road, a whole procession stretching almost endlessly. That was weird, yes, but none of it comes close to what happened that morning near the border. The morning that changed everything for me. It was around 2010. I was on a route along the southwest border near Mexico, about a 100-mile stretch. This road was not exactly quiet. Cartel activity was very present, and every driver who drove this route knew the risks. You did not drive unprepared. Most of us used the CB radio to inform each other what lay ahead. Sometimes it was like a mile-by-mile report, if something was going on, or if something unusual happened. We gave each other warnings, a small survival network. Mostly it was quiet, just static and long stretches without anything. But there were a few times where drivers noticed suspicious activity, a few trucks without lights following too closely, cars driving without headlights, or even occasional shootouts that you only heard about afterwards. That night, however, everything had been quiet. I was not even listening to the radio. I had driven this stretch so often that I did not think about it anymore. It was just another route on another evening. I had my usual stops I liked to use. Places off the radar, where I could rest without attracting too much attention. Not entirely legal parking spots, but when dealing with potential cartel members, you want to be invisible. This one spot I liked to use was on a gravel road, down in a dip between two old dilapidated billboards, and then into a small canyon where the truck fit perfectly, completely hidden from the road. It was Arizona, in the middle of nowhere. The stars shone bright above me, a perfect place to get some sleep. I drove in and turned off the engine, quickly ate something from the cooler. The air was still, the night calm, only occasionally the wind rustled through the desert. I looked at the stars for a while, let my thoughts wander, and then crawled into my bunk and made myself comfortable for the night. I must have fallen asleep watching a movie, because the next thing I remember was a loud thump. Something had hit my truck hard. I sat up, blinking into the darkness, and listened. There were footsteps outside. I moved forward, slid into the driver's seat, and looked through the windshield. It was dark. Too dark to see anything. Just vague shapes outside. Then, the footsteps stopped, and I just sat there holding my breath, waiting for something to happen. But nothing happened. The desert went silent again. I told myself it was probably just an animal, a coyote maybe. I crawled back into the bunk. I was just falling asleep again when I heard a scream. It sounded like it came from far out in the desert, really far away. It was a long, drawn-out scream, as if someone was in serious trouble. Then I heard another scream, and another. It was as if it was getting closer each time. A little more like when someone or something was slowly coming towards me. I sat up again, my heart hammering, and I listened for the screams. I heard voices, too many to count. They overlapped, spoke over each other. I could not understand words. They were too far away or distorted by the wind. But the tone of the voices, it sounded desperate, pleading even. And then, as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. And this silence afterwards was worse somehow, as if the desert had swallowed everything. I do not know why I did it, but I turned on the high beams and flashed 3 times into the night. Maybe I thought it would help someone out there find the way. Maybe it was just instinct. The lights cut through the darkness. I could see nothing, just the empty desert stretching out before me. I grabbed the CB radio, my heart still racing, and called for anyone nearby. After a few seconds of static, a voice crackled back. "Yeah, I hear you," said the driver. "Do you see anything out there?" "No, but I heard something," I answered. "Screams. People." It sounded like they were in trouble. The other driver was silent for a moment, then he answered in a low voice. "You should just stay there, buddy. I just got shot at by some guys without headlights, could barely escape. Cars are racing on the highway, as if looking for someone. Stay hidden. Whatever you heard, it is nothing good." That was definitely not what I wanted to hear. "Thanks for the warning," I said, but I already felt this gnawing fear deep in my stomach. I signed off the radio and sat there for a few more minutes just listening. But the night was perfectly silent again. Finally, I crawled back into the bunk, but sleep would not come. In my head, the screams and voices played over and over. The ghostly silence that had followed. Something was not right out there, and I did not want to be there when it found me. Morning came early, and I wasted no time getting ready to leave. I wanted to be on the road and far away from this place as quickly as possible. I did my usual departure checks and went through my routine. But as I stepped out of the cab, I saw something that stopped me dead in my tracks. About 6 meters from the truck lay a dark pool of blood in the sand. It was a large pool, the kind that tells you something bad must have happened. My first thought was an animal, obviously a coyote or another poor animal that had gotten into a fight in the night. But then I remembered the screams. I walked slowly over to the blood pool and squatted down to look at it closer. There were no tracks around it, no signs of animals, nothing. Just blood. I straightened up, feeling cold sweat on my skin, and did a quick walk around my truck. Everything seemed fine. No damage, nothing missing. So, I climbed back into the cab, started the engine, and reversed the truck out of the canyon and back onto the gravel road. And that is exactly where I saw the clothes. At first, I did not register what it was, just a few scraps of fabric lying in the dust, as if someone had thrown them out of a moving vehicle. But the further I drove, the more I saw shirts, pants, shoes. Everything was scattered along the road. Then came more blood, a few more pools distributed over the ground, splattered over rocks and smeared on bushes, and then I saw a body, or at least what was left of it. Hands, feet, scalp, parts of a torso, everything mixed with the clothing items, as if someone had torn these people apart, and then simply scattered them like trash. Exactly at that moment, the stench hit me, thick and disgusting, a mixture of blood and decay. I stepped on the brake, my heart racing and my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I did not want to drive further. I did not want to see any more, but I had no choice. I had to get out of here. I grabbed the CB radio and called for help, my voice shaking, hardly able to speak. A few other drivers answered pretty quickly, and all sounded just as scared as I was. "Something is going on here," said one of them. "A lot of people got hit last night. It is all over the news. Some execution, cartel nonsense. They call it the Mother's Day Massacre." My stomach turned. I had heard stories about cartel executions, but this here was something different, something worse. I put it in gear, and just drove on without looking back, without seeing any more of what lay behind me. But the images I had seen, they stayed with me. They burned themselves into my mind. The blood, the bodies, the screams in the night. And then something else hit me. Something I had not noticed until I had driven a good 30 kilometers down the road. It was not just the bodies, the blood, or even the clothes. It was this silence. Since the moment I had seen the first remains, I had not heard a single bird, not a single insect, not even wind blowing through the cacti. The desert was dead silent, as if the land itself was holding its breath, watching and waiting. The CB radio crackled again, and this time a voice unknown to me spoke. "Here is Jawbreaker. Are you still out there? Did you see him?" I did not answer. Next true horror story. Driving through foggy mountains at night is spooky enough. But when whispers break the silence and shadows move where they should not, you wish you had never taken this route. The terrifying night of this trucker in the Appalachians will keep you gripped until the end. I consider myself a practical person. When you are on the road as a long-haul driver, as long as I have been, you get used to looking things straight in the eye, flat tires, bad weather, endless nights on empty roads. But there was one night, a stretch of road that haunts me to this day. It was about 6 years ago, and I was driving through the Appalachians. I had been on the road for hours, transporting a nighttime load from North Carolina to West Virginia. The job was simple: pick up load, drive through the mountains, and deliver in the morning. I had driven this route dozens of times and expected nothing unusual. But that night, something felt different. The weather had turned bad early in the evening. A thick fog had rolled in, the kind that sticks to the ground and makes you feel like you are driving through a dream or a nightmare. My headlights cut through the fog, but barely. Visibility was terrible. I could only see a few meters in front of me. The winding road disappeared into the fog, as if leading me to a place where I did not belong. Still, I drove on. I had a window for delivery and did not want to let some fog stop me. I tried to concentrate on the road, but the silence was oppressive. It was not just the lack of sounds. It was how the fog seemed to swallow everything around me, completely isolating me. It must have been around 2 a.m. when I heard it for the first time, a whisper, so quiet it almost merged with the sound of the engine. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. Long hours on the road can make you hear and see things that are not really there. But the whisper did not disappear. I turned my head slightly and listened, trying to place the sound. It was faint, like a murmur right behind me. I glanced into the back of the cab, but naturally, No one was there. I shook my head and told myself I was just tired and needed a break. But deep inside I knew that was not true. The whisper was not in my head. It was as if it was in the truck, as if it was seeping through the cracks of my sanity. I turned up the heat, hoping the warmth would make me a bit more alert. The fog outside was just as thick as before, and I could not afford for my mind to wander. But the whisper did not stop. It got louder, more urgent. I could not understand the words, but the tone was cold, almost angry. My skin prickled with unease. About an hour later, it got worse. I was driving along a sharp curve when I saw it in my rearview mirror, a movement. Just a flicker of something, a shadow disappearing in the fog behind me. My heart leaped into my throat. For a moment, I thought it was an animal or another vehicle, but when I looked again, there was nothing. Just the road disappearing into the fog behind me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. You are seeing things, I told myself. You are tired, and the fog is playing tricks on you. But the explanation did not convince me. The shadow had been too distinct, too human. By 4 a.m., I was a nervous wreck. The whispering had not stopped, and the shadows in my mirror became more frequent. Every time I looked back, I saw something, just for a brief moment. A figure standing in the fog, watching me. But when I blinked, it was gone. I began to believe I was losing my mind. Maybe the isolation was becoming too much. Maybe it was the fog, the late hour, and the stress of the job driving me to the edge. But then something happened that I could not explain. I was driving on a long, straight stretch. The fog was so thick, I could barely see past the hood of my truck. The whispering had become louder, almost frantic, but I still could not understand the words. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw it, a face. I slammed on the brakes, my truck squealing, coming to a stop in the middle of the road. My chest tightened as I stared into the mirror, trying to catch my breath. There, on the back seat of my cab, was a face pale, expressionless, cold. It stared at me, its eyes dark and empty. Panic seized me, freezing me in place. I turned around quickly, expecting, no, fearing, to see someone on the back seat. But the cab was empty. I sat there for a moment, my heart hammering in my ears as I tried to comprehend what I had just seen. There was no way someone had gotten into my truck without me noticing. No way they could simply disappear. I forced myself to breathe, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. I did not want to look in the mirror again. I never wanted to see that face again. But I had to know. Slowly, I looked into the rearview mirror again. Nothing. Just the empty back seat. But that did not make it better. I could feel it, whatever it was still in the cab. It was watching me, waiting. I had to get out of here. I had to drive on, put as many miles as possible between me and this cursed road. I started the truck again, my hands shaking as I gripped the wheel tight. I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead, refusing to look in the mirror, no matter how much I wanted to. The fog was still thick, but I did not care. I just wanted to get away from what had found me in the mountains. Then the radio crackled. At first, I thought it was just static, but when I listened closer, I realized it was not. There was a voice in the noise, distorted and quiet, as if someone was speaking to me from a great distance, and it said my name, Mark. The voice whispered it. I froze. The voice was deep and guttural, as if coming from the depths of the earth. I reached out to turn off the radio, but before I could, the voice spoke again. Mark, do not look back. I yanked my hand away from the radio. I felt sick. The voice was still there, repeating the same phrase over and over, each time getting louder, more desperate. Do not look back. Do not look back. I did not want to. I knew I should not. I knew that if I looked in the mirror, I would see something I could never forget. But the voice pulled me, challenged me to violate its warning. My hand trembled as I raised it and touched the edge of the mirror. I had to know. I had to see. Slowly, I adjusted the mirror just enough to catch a glimpse of the back seat. And there it was again, the face. It was just staring at me. I yanked the mirror back to its original position and floored the gas pedal, racing down the fog-shrouded road at a dangerous speed. But I did not care. I had to get away. The voice on the radio got louder, a wild jumble of distorted sounds, all screaming the same phrase. Do not look back. I did not dare. I kept my eyes fixed on the road, even as I felt the cold presence in the cab growing stronger, as if the face was getting closer, inch by inch towards me. My hands shook so hard I could barely control the wheel. Finally, the fog lifted. The radio went silent. I did not stop until I reached the next town. I pulled into a diner parking lot, turned off the engine, and sat there for a long time, just trying to breathe normally again. I told no one what happened. Who would have believed me? A ghostly face in my rearview mirror, a voice warning me not to look back. It sounded crazy even to me. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. Well, to this day, I have never driven through those mountains again. No matter how much time passes, I cannot forget that face. I cannot forget how it stared at me. Sometimes, late at night when I am alone on the road, I still hear it. That quiet whisper, do not look back. And I do not. Next true horror story. Never driving alone on a deserted desert road might sound peaceful, but what would you do if your only chance for help came from someone you cannot trust? This eerie encounter of a trucker will keep you glued to your seat until the end. Driving a truck on long, lonely roads had always been a kind of escape for me. Some people cannot handle the solitude, but for me, it is peaceful, just you, the truck, and the road. At least, that is what it usually was. I was driving in the middle of Nevada, on a lonely country road. The kind of road where you do not see another vehicle for hours, let alone a town. It was shortly before midnight when I first noticed something was wrong with my truck. The engine made a quiet sputtering sound, at first barely noticeable but enough to catch my attention. I looked at the dashboard, no warning lights, nothing seemed wrong. But the sound remained like a quiet, regular cough of the engine. I thought I could still make it to the next rest stop, which was about 2 hours away. 20 minutes later, the sputtering turned into a complete standstill. Before I realized it, the engine was off. The truck rolled slowly to the side of the road, and the hum of the engine ceased into silence. I sat there gripping the steering wheel while trying to process what had just happened. I had always meticulously maintained my truck, and it had never given me trouble. When I turned the key again, I heard only the terrible click of a dead engine. Frustrated, I turned on the hazard lights, got out of the cab, and was hit by the desert heat. Even though the sun had long since set, desert nights are usually cool. But something about this air felt wrong. I opened the hood, grabbed the flashlight from the toolbox, and shone it over the engine. I am no mechanic, but everything looked fine, no leaks, no visible damage. Yet the truck would not move anymore. I grabbed the CB radio and called, "Breaker 1, is anyone out there? My truck is dead. I am standing here on the side of the road. Anyone nearby?" Silence. I tried again, this time louder, my voice increasingly tense. "Come on, there has to be someone. I need help." Nothing, just silence. I stood there, the quiet pressing in on me. My phone had no signal, and the next town was too far to walk. I was stranded in the middle of nowhere. Then I saw them headlights in the distance, faint but getting closer. Relief flooded through me. Maybe it was another trucker who could help. As the vehicle got closer, I saw that it was an old run-down pickup. It rolled to a stop a few meters in front of my truck, and a man got out. He was tall and skinny, his clothes worn and dusty, as if he had been on the road for days. Something about him immediately put me on alert. "Need help?" he asked with a rough, deep voice. For a moment, I did not know how to answer. Something about him felt wrong, but what choice did I have? I was stranded, and he was the only human for miles. "Yes," I said finally, forcing a smile. "My truck broke down. I am not sure what the problem is, it just died." He nodded slowly, his eyes wandering to my truck. "Mind if I take a look?" I hesitated but finally said, "Sure. Go ahead." He walked to the truck with a strangely deliberate slowness. My unease grew while I watched him. He asked no questions, and did not really look closely at the engine. He just stood there staring into it, his back to me. The whole situation felt wrong, as if I was missing something obvious. "Do you see anything?" I asked, breaking the silence. He did not answer immediately. Then he turned to me, his eyes cold and calculating. "Looks like you have a problem," he said, his voice almost amused. "But I can help. Not far from here, just off the road, I have some tools. We can tow your truck and fix it." My gut screamed that I should decline. Something about his voice, the way he looked at me, felt wrong. "I appreciate the offer, but I would rather wait for a tow truck. It will not take long for someone to come by," I said, forcing another smile. His eyes narrowed slightly. For a moment, we just stood there staring at each other. "Are you sure?" he asked, taking a step closer. "It is a long way to the next town. It could take hours for someone to come by." I forced myself to smile. "I am sure. Thanks anyway for stopping." He stared at me for another moment, then turned around and walked back to his truck. But he did not drive away. He just sat there, the engine running. I climbed back into the cab and locked the doors, my hands trembling while I tried to calm my breathing. The man's truck did not move. He was still sitting there waiting. Minutes passed, then an hour. His truck had not moved an inch. Suddenly, it rolled forward and stopped next to my truck. My stomach turned with fear as I saw his silhouette through the window, his face illuminated in the dim glow of his dashboard. He was watching me, his expression unfathomable. He rolled down the window and leaned out. "Are you sure you do not want help, buddy?" My heart hammered in my chest. I did not answer. Instead, I grabbed my phone, praying for a signal. Nothing. The man got out of his truck and walked toward my door. My hands fumbled desperately for the key, but the engine would not start. Panic surged through me as he knocked on the door. His voice was deep and threatening. "Open up. Let's talk." I grabbed the tire iron from under my seat, ready to defend myself in case he tried to get in. But just as he reached for the door handle, I heard another engine. Headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, cutting through the darkness. Another truck was approaching. The man froze, his hand still on the door handle. He looked over his shoulder at the approaching vehicle, turned silently, and got into his truck. He drove away into the darkness. The other trucker pulled up behind me. At first, I was too shaken to get out, but eventually I forced myself to wave at him. When I told him what happened, he stayed with me until the tow truck arrived. That night was the only time I encountered real danger on the road. I still drive truck, but when I am on a lonely country road, I keep my eyes on the road and never stop for strangers. Sometimes the people offering help are exactly the ones you need to fear the most. Next true horror story. Truck stops at night might seem like a safe haven, but a restless driver discovers a terrifying truth. Sometimes the scariest things are not just imagination. Stay tuned, because this eerie encounter will make you doubt every time you stop. I have been a long-haul driver for years and have experienced quite a few creepy moments on the road, but nothing, and I mean really nothing, comes close to what happened to me one night at an abandoned rest stop. It was late October, and I was hauling a load from Arizona to Georgia. I had driven almost 11 hours without a break, and exhaustion was setting in. My eyelids were getting heavy, and I knew I had to stop before I fell asleep at the wheel. The highway was empty, the kind of stretch where nothing but darkness and the hum of your engine accompanies you. Then I saw a sign for a rest stop just 2 miles away. Perfect timing, I thought. I slowed down, exited the highway, and drove into the parking lot. The place was practically deserted. 2 other trucks were parked at the very end, their cabs dark and lifeless. Not a soul was to be seen. The rest stop itself was unimpressive: a few parking spots, run-down picnic tables, and an old restroom building that appeared not to have been maintained in years. A single flickering streetlight cast long, ghostly shadows across the cracked asphalt. I parked my truck in the middle of the parking lot, not close to the other trucks nor far away. Something about this isolation bothered me, but I blamed it on tiredness. I turned off the engine and let out a long sigh of relief. The silence that surrounded me was unsettlingly quiet. No wind, no crickets, just dead, oppressive silence. I took my thermos and took a big gulp of coffee, hoping to get rid of the uneasy feeling spreading inside me. It did not help. After a few minutes, I decided to stretch my legs and use the restroom before settling down to sleep. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out of the cab. The night air was cold, and the ground crunched under my boots as I walked toward the restroom building. The building was in even worse condition than I had expected. The door hung crooked on its hinges, and the walls were covered in graffiti. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The smell hit me immediately: musty, damp, and disgusting, as if the place had not been cleaned in years. I hit the light switch, but nothing happened. Sighing, I shone the flashlight over the cracked tiles and peeling paint, looking for the at least halfway clean stall. When I was done, I heard footsteps. Quiet at first, then louder, as if someone was walking slowly around the building, circling it. I froze. The rest stop had been empty when I arrived. No car had pulled up, and the trucks at the end were still dark and silent. So who the hell was out there? Quickly, I finished up and stepped out of the stall. I listened closely, but the footsteps had stopped. Maybe I had just imagined it. Maybe it was the wind or an animal. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and shone my flashlight over the parking lot. Nothing, just the same eerie silence and the flickering streetlight in the distance. I shook off the bad feeling and started walking back to my truck. Halfway there, I saw him, a man standing next to one of the picnic tables. He was barely visible in the dark, hands buried deep in the pockets of a heavy jacket, face hidden by a hood. My heart skipped a beat. He had not been there when I arrived, of that I was sure. I stopped and aimed my flashlight at him. He did not move. He just stood there, perfectly still. I could not make out his face, but something about his stance, how he stood there, as if waiting for something, made my skin crawl. I forced myself to stay calm and walked on, keeping my eyes fixed on him as I got closer to my truck. When I looked back over my shoulder, he was gone. I climbed into the cab, locked the doors, and sat there for a moment to calm my breathing. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was nothing, just some guy passing through, maybe another trucker. But if that was true, why had I not heard him coming? I lay down on the bunk in the back of the cab, turned off the light, and tried to relax. But the bad feeling only got worse. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the man at the picnic table in front of me, how he stood there watching me. I do not know how long I lay there, but nearly an hour must have passed when I heard it again, footsteps, this time right outside my truck. I shot up, grabbed my flashlight, and shone it through the window. No one was there, just the empty parking lot and the flickering streetlight. Then came the knocking, soft at first, almost polite, like a quiet tap on the door. I froze, my breath hitched. The knocking came again, this time louder and more insistent. Then I heard it, another knock, this time from the other side of the cab. My heart raced as I realized there was not just one person out there. There were at least two. I reached for my phone, my hands shaking as I tried to dial 911. No signal. Naturally not. The knocking became aggressive, as if someone desperately wanted to get in. I thought about getting out and scaring them off, but something told me that was a bad idea. Instead, I slammed my fist on the horn. The loud blast echoed over the rest stop, and for a moment there was silence. Then, I heard an engine. Headlights cut through the darkness as another vehicle drove onto the parking lot. In the light, I saw them, 3 figures around my truck, all wearing dark clothing, their faces hidden under hoods. When the lights hit them, they froze. Then they ran as if on a secret command and disappeared into the desert. I wasted no time. I turned the key, started the engine, and drove away as fast as possible, my heart racing, my hands shaking on the wheel, and I did not look back. I did not want to look back. I drove through the whole night and stopped only at a well-lit rest stop a few hours later. Even there, I did not feel safe. I could not stop thinking about the figures who had knocked on my doors. When I told other truckers what happened, one of them mentioned rumors about that rest stop. Supposedly people had disappeared there. Trucks were found abandoned, but there was never evidence, only stories. Since then, I never stop at remote rest stops again. You never know who or what waits for you there in the dark. Next true horror story. What would you do if you noticed something following you on a deserted country road, but every attempt to escape only makes the situation worse? This driver's terrifying experience will keep you breathless until the end. I have been a trucker for over 20 years and have seen many strange things on the road. Long night drives can play tricks on your mind, shadows seem to move, and your tired eyes blur reality. But nothing I have ever experienced comes close to what happened to me on a late November evening in Texas. It was a lonely country road stretching for miles through the desert. The road was straight as an arrow with no towns, gas stations, or rest stops far and wide. Just endless darkness. Normally the solitude did not bother me. It gave me time to think. But that night something felt wrong. The air was heavy, it pressed on my chest, and made it hard to breathe. My headlights illuminated the cracked asphalt in front of me. But beyond that, there was only blackness. I looked at the clock on my dashboard. It was 2:34. I still had hours to drive before stopping for the night. After about an hour, I noticed a car in my rearview mirror. At first, I only saw a pair of headlights in the distance. I thought nothing of it. It is rare to see other vehicles on such a road at this time, but not impossible. Maybe another trucker or someone driving cross-country. I kept an eye on it, a habit I have acquired over the years. Knowing what happens behind you is just as important as keeping an eye on the road ahead. But the car did not get closer. It stayed back, maintaining exactly the same distance. After 20 minutes, I became uneasy. I was driving at a constant speed, about 65 miles per hour. Any car would have passed me long ago, or at least caught up. But this one stayed exactly where it was. I told myself it was nothing, just a coincidence. Maybe the driver was cautious or nervous to overtake a big truck at night. Still, I could not shake the queasy feeling in my stomach. My palms began to sweat. I kept checking the mirror, waiting for the car to either speed up or fall back. But that did not happen. Another 30 minutes passed, and the car had not moved an inch. My concentration on the road waned as I kept watch on the mirror. My heart began to beat faster. Although technically nothing had happened yet, but deep inside, I knew this was not normal. This was not just some guy driving through the desert at night. Something was wrong. I decided to drive slower and let the car pass me. Maybe the driver would reveal his intentions that way. I took my foot off the gas and watched the headlights in the mirror, expecting them to get closer, but they did not. I drove slower, first at 50 miles per hour, then at 40. The car stayed exactly where it was without getting closer or falling back. Now I was getting nervous. This was impossible. I reduced my speed further until I was crawling at only 30 miles per hour. Still, the headlights in the mirror remained exactly the same. My stomach tightened. Finally, I slammed on the brakes and brought my truck to a stop in the middle of the road. I stared into the rearview mirror, waiting for the car to come closer. But when I looked again, it was gone. The road behind me was empty, no headlights, no car. Just darkness stretching for miles. I squinted, trying to see if the car had turned off somewhere. But there were no exits, no side roads, no way it could disappear. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I knew I had not imagined it. The car was there, and now it was not. I started the truck again and drove off, this time faster. My hands were wet with sweat, gripping the steering wheel while my mind desperately searched for explanations. Maybe the driver turned off the lights or broke down. Maybe it was just a trick of the light. But no matter how much I tried to explain it rationally, the bad feeling did not get better. 15 minutes later, the headlights appeared in my mirror again. My stomach turned over. The car was back, exactly in the same spot as before in the mirror. It was as if nothing had happened, as if it had never been gone. Panic rose in me, my hands trembling on the wheel as I tried to breathe calmly. I did not know what to do. Stopping had not worked, and driving faster seemed to make no difference either. The car just stayed there like a predator stalking its prey. Then it began to move. Slowly at first, but then it got faster. My heart beat in my throat as I saw it getting closer. It did not swerve. It did not flash its lights. It just came straight at me, steady and fast. I floored the gas pedal. I raced at 70, then 80 miles per hour down the country road. But no matter how fast I drove, the car caught up with me. The headlights filled my rearview mirror, so bright I had to squint to see the road. Then it was right behind me, so close, I could almost make out the shape of the car in the mirror. My breath hitched. I could not think, I only knew I had to flee. But just as suddenly as it had appeared, the car steered into the darkness and vanished from my mirror. I did not stop until the next gas station, a small run-down shop that looked like it had not been renovated since the 70s. But I did not care. I pulled into the parking lot, jumped out of my truck, and ran inside, my legs shaking so much I could barely stand. The attendant looked at me like I was crazy, but that did not bother me. I just wanted to be among people. So I was no longer alone. After I had calmed down a bit, I told him what happened. He just shrugged and gave me a knowing look. "You are not the first one to see something like that on this road," he said. "Happens more often than you think. Some people say there is a ghost car out there chasing drivers. It does not hurt anyone. It just scares you to death." A ghost car, maybe. But I could not explain what had happened. I stayed at the gas station for over an hour until my heartbeat calmed down and my hands stopped shaking. Finally, I forced myself back into my truck and drove on. But I never drove that route again. I avoid it like the plague, because no matter how much I try to convince myself it was just my imagination, a part of me knows it was not. Whatever was out there that night, it was not normal. And I will not wait to find out what happens when it catches you. Next true horror story. Lonely roads at night are nothing new for Jep Wilcox, a seasoned trucker used to the solitude of his profession. But when an eerie encounter on an abandoned mountain pass takes a sinister turn, he realizes that some shortcuts come with a price. Will he outsmart the hunter chasing him, or will he become the next ghost story truckers tell each other? The sky was dark, a deep blue that only appears just before dawn. I have been driving trucks for nearly 2 decades and have seen every color the sky can give. But that night felt different. It was supposed to be just another job, hauling a load of lumber from North Idaho to Wyoming. The roads were empty, as is usual at this time, and the trees flanked me on both sides, their dark silhouettes a constant companion on this lonely stretch. I am Jep Wilcox. Since I was old enough to drive legally, I have been hauling freight across the country. My life before that was not so nice. Lost both parents early, bounced around foster homes, and found solace on the open road. Here is where I belong. Here I feel free. Yet that night, freedom felt more like isolation, and isolation like a trap. The road I was on was not one I took often. It led through a lesser-known path in the mountains. A shortcut if you knew how to master the tight curves and steep climbs. It was the kind of road where a single lapse in concentration could send you into the trees below. But I liked the challenge. It kept me alert. About halfway through the pass, I saw headlights in the distance. That was unusual. No one takes this route unless they want to save a few hours. The lights were bright, piercing the darkness and getting bigger as they approached. My mind told me it had to be another truck or someone who knew the road as well as I did. But as the vehicle got closer, I realized it was not slowing down. It was even accelerating. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles white. The approaching truck was an old model, probably from the 70s, its rusty body barely held together by mismatched spare parts. The driver's face was in shadow, but I could see his outline tall, broad-built, and sitting ramrod straight. He was driving on the wrong side of the road, straight at me. I pressed the horn to get his attention, but he did not even flinch. At the last moment, I jerked the wheel to the right, my tires skidding on the gravel as the truck flew past me. For a moment, everything was silent, nothing but the sound of my heartbeat in my ears. Then I saw in the rearview mirror the truck making a sharp turn. My stomach tightened. He was chasing me. I pushed my truck to its limits. The engine roared as I raced down the mountain pass, but no matter how fast I drove, the headlights remained close behind me, an unrelenting hunter. Whoever was driving knew the road just as well as I did, maybe even better. Adrenaline surged through me as I took the curves tighter, regardless of whether the load in the back shifted dangerously. It did not matter if I lost the wood. All that mattered was shaking him off. Every time I thought I had gained some ground, he appeared again, closer and closer. Finally, I reached a straight stretch, one of the few on this godforsaken route. I pressed the gas pedal to the floor, feeling the truck shudder under the strain. The trees blurred into dark streaks on both sides, but the headlights remained behind me, a tireless hunter. Ahead, I saw the faint glow of a gas station. It was one of those 24-hour stations for truckers, offering stale coffee and greasy burgers. But in this moment, it was civilization and exactly what I needed. I pulled into the parking lot, my tires screeching as I brought the truck to a halt. The old truck stopped right behind me. I jumped out, left the engine running, and ran to the gas station, my heart hammering in my chest as I heard the heavy boots of the other driver hitting the asphalt behind me. The shop was almost empty, just a cashier behind the counter and a few truckers sipping their coffees. The door chimed as I burst in, and the drivers looked up, their tired eyes widening as they saw the look of panic on my face. "There is a guy chasing me," I shouted with a strained voice. "He is right outside!" The cashier, a middle-aged man with a belly, looked at me skeptically. "Are you sure, buddy? No one came in here." I turned around, expecting to see the man in the doorway, but no one was there. I could see my truck through the glass, but the old rusted truck that had followed me was gone. I did not understand it. I was sure he had been right behind me. I ran to the door and stared into the darkness, but the night was silent apart from the hum of the neon lights above me. The drivers exchanged glances, probably thinking I had lost my mind, but I knew what I had seen. I walked nervously back and forth, my mind racing. Had he driven away? Was he waiting somewhere outside? The thought of going back out made my skin crawl, but I could not stay in the gas station forever. I had to drive on to finish my route. I forced myself to stay calm, bought a cup of bitter coffee, and went back outside. My truck was the only one in the parking lot. No sign of the other vehicle, no sign of the man. I checked my trailer to make sure everything was secure, and then climbed back into the cab, locking the doors behind me. I sat there for a long time, trying to convince myself it was over, that I was safe. But as I left the parking lot and drove back onto the road, I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every movement in the corner of my eye made me flinch. My hands were still shaking as I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white. The rest of the drive was a blurred mix of paranoia and exhaustion. I kept looking in the mirrors, expecting the headlights to appear again, but they never did. Next true horror story. Imagine driving down a lonely highway surrounded by silence, and suddenly the radio crackles. A strange voice speaks up, a voice that knows everything about you. What would you do? One of the first things I learned as a trucker is that you cannot always rely on your phone. Whether bad weather knocks out the towers, or you are simply in a remote area with bad reception, something can always go wrong. That is why trucks are equipped with state-of-the-art radio systems, a lifeline to communicate with other drivers and call for help in emergencies. But what happens when that lifeline itself becomes the danger? I was driving through Nebraska on a small, lonely country road. It was about 6 p.m., and the sun was just beginning to set. The rhythmic hum of the truck engine filled the cab while my thoughts wandered during the drive. I decided to stop for a short break, treat myself to a quick meal, and call my wife. But the moment I tried to dial, I realized I had no cell reception. Frustrated but not surprised, I sent a text, thinking it would go through as soon as I had reception again. I unpacked the sandwich I had bought earlier and stared into the gathering darkness. The landscape seemed eerily quiet. The air in the cab suddenly felt colder, and a shiver ran down my spine. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and a queasy feeling came over me. What is going on here? I asked myself, scanning my surroundings. It was hard to see anything beyond the dim light of my headlights. I shook off the feeling, finished my sandwich, and decided to drive on. Hardly 2 minutes after I was back on the road, the CB radio crackled. Someone was trying to break through. I grabbed the microphone. "This is Charlie 2. Who is this?" Before I could say more, an eerie voice interrupted me. "Where are you going?" The tone was deep and strange. It was definitely no one from my company. "Who is this?" I asked sharply. Silence. I tried to dismiss it as a bad joke, but a minute later, the voice spoke again. "I still see you." My grip on the steering wheel tightened, while my mind feverishly searched for an explanation. I looked in my mirrors, searching for headlights or any signs of another vehicle, but the road was empty. My stomach tightened as the voice continued speaking. "You are driving a cherry red Mack truck, loaded with lumber, heading to Bayside Freight Yard." My blood froze in my veins. The person even named my license plate. With a pounding heart, I looked in the mirrors again. Nothing. The isolation on the country road suddenly felt crushing. I looked at my phone lying on the dashboard, but without reception, it was useless. "Why are you running away?" sneered the voice, as if it could read my thoughts. "You cannot escape me." My palms became wet with sweat while I tried to keep my composure. 20 agonizing minutes passed. The radio remained silent during this time, and I began to think it was all over. My nerves calmed gradually until the CB radio crackled again. "That was fun," said the voice, disturbingly calm. "Until we meet again." Static filled the radio before it went silent. In that moment, my phone vibrated. Reception was back. I called my boss immediately and explained to him what had just happened. He assured me that no one from the warehouse would play such a prank, and we were both baffled. To this day, I have no idea how someone got on my radio frequency or knew so much about me and my truck. The only thing stopping me from losing my nerve on the road is the thought that it was just a prank. But deep inside, I know the truth. It was not just a prank. It was something worse.